great to be here today, and a great group, and really nice to come over the mountain yesterday, and rode with Ray over here. And so, those of you that don't, how many of you know Ray? Okay.
We don't want to wait.
Well, when you ride with him for 8 hours in the van, you are worn out. And we get along good, but we do tend to have a lot of debates as we go along. And so I'm very happy to be here and be on the program today with some of the people I've learned a lot of what I try to teach farmers from. And so we'll try to go through this and learn together. We're really seeing a real change in attitude about livestock management in North Carolina, about our pasture-based systems. Lots of reasons for that. A lot of it is, I think, the cost of inputs and what's happening, and then the fact that we have a lot of tools and we have a lot of educational activity to get people exposed to this. Now, we basically call our, well, Jay, it's not working. Okay, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our educational activities and some of what we're doing, as well as some of the philosophy behind our program that we call Amazing Grazing. And it's been a program that's been around for a very long time, and as I say, I'll talk more about that as we go along. But this all kind of started for me about 15 years ago, probably. I've been doing controlled grazing work for a long time, but I was, one thing about me, I do farm with my folks and spend most of my weekends up in Virgin Island, Virginia. It's right on the North Carolina-Virginia border. And so my philosophy has always been that I don't do anything, I don't recommend anything to farmers that I have not already tried. And I'll just tell you, about 2/3 of the things that sound like good ideas don't work very well. And so if you don't have that approach in extension and education, then you can get some stuff out there that doesn't work. And so it's really important that we keep in mind, as scientists, that we either got to be doing some of this on site, or we need to be well connected to the people that are using what we're talking about, and have some little demos or some work on the site before we get really excited and get people doing stuff to a large extent. So at any rate, I was up on the farm one year, late March in '99, and we have a pretty typical cow-calf deal for our area, and about 150 cows at that time. This is a kind of the time of year where we're finally glad winter's about over. Normally we start grazing about the 1st of April in that area. And I've been out on the road all week doing this kind of thing, and went up to the farm, and I went back to check the cows, which usually I try to do that on Sunday. I went back and looked, and I was just kind of shocked at what I saw. We had been dry, so the stream flow was very low. Cows were drinking out of this little stream, and I was just kind of, it was one of those days I was really tired, and I looked at that, and I just thought, what the heck am I doing? I'm the biggest hypocrite in the world here. I'm talking about out controlled grazing, and here we've got this situation back home. And so I kind of had an awakening that day. I decided I'm going to sample this. So I went upstream and took a sample of water and went downstream where this goes off onto the neighbor's property. And upstream we had a little iron and a little bit of ammonia, just a trace background there that probably not unusual depending on coming out of a little bit of a wetland area and into that pasture. But where it left our property, it had 15 parts per million iron, and that's basically just from suspended sediments in that water. And it had 1.3 parts per million ammonia. And the only place that really can come from in that system is these critters right up there on top. So this is an issue, and it's all over the place. The number of people that have a system like this, as opposed to one where the fences or the creeks are fenced out and protected, is a very high percentage of our folks. And so we've got a big challenge out there to work with. And so we basically said, well, we better start right here. So we did do a renovation project on that particular area. And this was at a time when NRCS in Virginia would cost share upstream water without requiring you to fence the creek out. And as I looked at that, I thought, well, that seems kind of crazy. I'm going to go ahead and fence that creek out. And so this is the before picture, and this is 2 years later. Again, late March, same kind of situation. I went back there. Cows were actually in the same field. I wish I'd captured that. But this creek was completely healed in the 2-year period by keeping cattle out of there. And really made a big difference. And you can see, I think you can see a faint line right here. That is a single strand of polymer. And so this, if you have good electrical fencing, you know how to manage that, you can make a lot of difference in the landscape with some very, very low input. So this is just a kind of a close-up of that stream channel. And there's really, the water in there was clean and clear. And I went back to that spot where I took those samples. And this time we had, again, a little iron in our water naturally, but basically upstream, downstream, no difference on that. So just a little bit of effort in that situation made a massive difference in our farm. I really got excited about this, and we've really launched into a lot of development since that time. Now, as I talked a little bit about this last winter, I decided, well, I'm going to go back early March to that same spot. So this is 2013, that same spot, and there's that same, believe it or not, Doug Peterson back there, this is the same polywire that I put up in 1999. And it's temporary, but you know, it's like there's nothing more permanent than a temporary solution. But this is that same area, and if you see, there was a little small tree in that picture earlier, right there, and that's that tree now. And this is full of wildlife and all kinds of stuff in there, and so you can make some long-term changes just by some very, very inexpensive but thoughtful management. We'll talk about that as we go on. Well, I think our increase in interest in this whole area started during the drought in 2007. We had some terrible droughts that we had to go through there a couple of years, and I know that was even up in this country in those days. And I was in a group that was talking about pasture renovation, and they came up with a bunch of disaster money in the state to help people replant their pastures. And as I drove to home every weekend and looked at our pastures and what we were doing, we were feeding cows in the sacrifice area. We had pastures grazed down to 2 or 3 inches. And when it rained, and this process really was after it had started to rain, and we realized a lot of these pastures are completely dead. We've got to replant them. Well, our pastures, within 2 weeks of getting rain, were growing like crazy and looked great. And our neighbors' pastures were dead. And so, and it was clear to most everybody that the reason these pastures were dead is because they were overgrazed. You know, the drought killed them, but we helped a lot. And so as we talked about this cost share program to help people replant pastures, we said, you know, can't we do something educationally connected to this funding to get people to think about doing a better job on their pastures? So we fell short of requiring education to get that cost share money, but it was strongly encouraged, and we got some funds to do a lot of activities. So these groups all supported us in that, and really started a lot of interest in doing on-farm demonstrations and projects across the state. So back to this amazing grazing, we've used that for a very long time. It's been around since the 80s as a program. But recently we've just started using it because people want something to latch onto. They want kind of logos and slogans and those kinds of things in programs really work well. And so this amazing grazing, I'm stuck with it because I've been using it for long enough now to where a very large group of people in North and South Carolina, when you say that, they know what that means. And so what it is an educational program that we have training for advisors, and this is one of the key components of it, our extension agents, our conservationists, veterinarians around the country, as well as industry consultants. And we do a national pasture ecology school for NRCS folks, for their national staff, as well as the national veterinarian group with beef cattle, We do seminars there as well. We also do a lot of training for producers, including publications and hands-on workshops, which is basically our key activity that we do, connected to demonstrations. And then we have a lot of applied research that comes out of this, some of it on farm, some of it on research stations as well. But a lot of integration of the research, the demonstration, and the farm practice and developing a cohort of producers out there that is very interested in doing this. Now, if you think about controlled grazing, and again, it is not the norm in our world by any means. It's not the norm anywhere in the country. But you go to other places, and it's just the way that they always have done things. And so you don't have quite the educational challenge that we have. But when you start talking about the benefits to farmers, the first one is profitability. There's no question that once you get into it, you can reduce your fuel and feed costs, your fertilizer costs, and improve the life of those pasture stands. And a well-managed perennial pasture will last your lifetime and longer. I mean, a lot of these in Europe have been around for 200 years, and they're great quality pastures. So you should not have to have lots of pasture renovation in perennial pastures. It's good for the health and well-being of the animals, and again, that's one of the main things that we're under fire in the livestock industry for. And there's no question that in the dead of winter, this is where a cow needs to be. And it's excellent nutrition. We have reduced diseases from calf scours and some of those kinds of things associated with mud and manure. The cows are more comfortable. A couple of really key things that I point out to people is that the health problems in your animals are very quickly noticed. And these folks that have cattle out roaming around on 20 cows on 50 acres, there's lots of days they don't ever see them. There's cows in there they don't see for weeks or months at a time. And so if you are controlled grazing your animals and moving them frequently, you can't help but see them. You put yourself close to them, and they get used to being close to you. And as you walk down, after you've moved a group of cows like this, you walk down the line, you can look every one of them right in the eye, and you can see runny eyes, and you see lameness and those kinds of things, and it's really important management too. Push the wrong button here, but basically, it's better mental health for the farmer. Again, this winter was depressing. How many of you have cattle or livestock? Okay, it's time you get to the end of the winter, in a winter like this where we have a lot of rough conditions, a lot of feeding, it's a difficult time. So going out here and putting cows fresh grass, using the polywire is just, to me, it's just such a mental lift in the winter. It's just incredible. And so I try to do it every weekend. But we also have these tremendous environmental benefits. And we have reduced runoff and water quality. I mean, this is key. I love the way Ray does this, and it gets people thinking about that. And I'm going to talk about him a little bit more later and tell you some things. I don't want to get sidetracked in that, but we have improved nutrient distribution. That manure is cycling nutrients through these cattle or livestock, whatever you have, and the more we control where they are, the more we encourage them to be at a different spot every day, the more we get that manure scattered around, and we can use those fertilizer nutrients. When it's deposited in a place with very high soil fertility, it doesn't do much good. You get a little benefit out of the nitrogen, but not anything else. And improve soil health. Again, an 8-hour conversation about what is soil health yesterday, and I know now that even Ray doesn't completely know what it is, so I feel better about my lack of understanding of soil health. It's a bigger concept than any of us, I think, can imagine at this point, and that's great. That's really great. So people go to some of these farms where we've been doing grazing management for 30 or 40 years, and just like here where you got the no-till that's been in place for so long, and people say, how do you get there? I mean, when does that happen? How do you get there? Well, to have truly amazing grazing, you've got to understand the pasture is a very complex ecosystem that we don't understand, and we can really screw it up. And we need to observe when we do that and change our management and react and think about that system and not do the same thing every day routinely without watching what's happening. We need to understand the animals. And we need to get performance on these animals. That's the other thing of it. It's a trade-off between the forages and the animals. We can't have the very best soil health, the very best forages, and not feed our animals appropriately and not have them grow. That's not going to make us any money. So we have to manage them as a part of the system. And they are. They're an integral part of that system. We need to understand the plants. There's so much difference between them. We need to understand them and how to use them. And most importantly, we need to develop a management style that works for us. And this is the most complicated part of it. because everybody's different. Everybody has a different amount of time, a different amount of capital to invest, different amounts of people working for them, or that they might get to go do stuff for them. So very complex, and it's going to be different on every farm. So there's no recipe for exactly the style that will work for you. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we get into it. Well, this is kind of a little bit of a story about the way I grew up. I grew up around my dad and his friends, and it's a long story. I'm not going to go into that, but we spent most of the summers on a small farm there in North Carolina. And we spent a fair bit of time out looking at cows. And so I grew up knowing that, she's a Baldy. She's got Herb and Angus in her. The one in the back there that's smoky or brown is called a smoky. She's got some Simmentaler or something like that in her. The other cow here is an Angus cow, and they're fat. I learned that. They're mud fat. And that's the early stages of body condition scoring, I think. But they'd sit around and say, I need to spend 30 minutes. Well, that cow, she's sure is fat. And I realized now how much I missed that was there. And I think they were mostly out there to try to get out of the house, get away from my mom and my dad and the other wives that were in the house. But what they didn't teach me was, this is the solar collector. Okay, I learned that from Jim Garish 25 years ago. But this is incredibly important that there's this green canopy out there. I knew what a horse nettle was because I love getting up hay, and I knew when there was horse nettles in it. But there's a bunch of weeds here. I didn't realize I could have got down on my knees there and found 15 species of plants. I love that stuff, but they did not think about it that way. They didn't even realize that it existed, let alone what's going on under the surface here. They had no idea and had no interest in really understanding it. And so we do a disservice by not looking deeply into these systems that we work with. So that's the point, is that I hope that we'll turn to our kids and get them thinking about the system, get them seeing the system without having to look specifically at parts of it. And that's kind of what it is. Now, we know that whether you're talking about cover crops and these cropping systems or grazing systems or whatever, mineral cycles, the nutrient cycles are incredibly important. And this is just a schematic in a nitrogen cycle. Most everybody in here knows this, so I won't spend any time on it. But there's a lot of complicated stuff going on here that can help us to achieve what we're trying to achieve through this animal. The use of legumes and the use of that manure and getting it distributed well can help us to take this part, the factory source, out of the picture if we can, and for the most part. So that's going to be beneficial to everybody. But we've got to be aware that these things are complicated. Now, this is a real simplified ecological diagram of what goes on in the pasture ecosystem. And we all recognize the major forage plants, the cows, and the managers of those animals, that big piece of it. But there's lots of other stuff going on out there with wildlife and that sort of thing that's above the surface, and then things going on below the surface, the earthworms, the dung beetles, the soil organisms, and the soil organic matter. All of this is so complex. This is a highly simplified, by like 100 times maybe, of what's going on. And so nobody totally understands this, but collectively, I'd say the folks in this room have a pretty good handle on it. So it's incredibly important that we collaborate, because nobody can figure this thing out. I mean, it's just everybody. We need experts in all the little pieces of it. But we need people like Ray to say, you experts need to talk to each other. Because if you work together, you can sure learn some things. And so that's the challenge for all of us, because you have to get pretty narrow to understand the details of this. You've just got to not lose those connections with the people that are working on the different parts. Now, this became really apparent to me I guess it's been about 15 years ago. I started working with an entomologist that was a dung beetle guy. And again, one of the stories, I don't want to get into too many stories, I don't have time, but one of the stories about me as a kid was when I was in kindergarten, I used to walk a mile to school every day, and that's the truth, I won't blow that up. It's not very far, people, but but I did. We all walked every day, and my mom. I mean, we had 7 kids. We all walked, and no supervision or whatever. It's no, we got in all kinds of trouble on the way home, of course. But one day I didn't come home in kindergarten. I walked home, and I didn't come home. And my mom, after about an hour, my mom's like, "What in the world?" So she got in the car and went to school to see if she could figure out what happened. Well, about halfway there I was laying in the ditch. And so she pulled out the sirens, came up, and she said, "Honey, you all right?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "What are you doing?" "Looking at ants." And she said, "You're doing what?" I said, look at this ant hill here. They're all different sizes. And there's different ones doing different things. That was kindergarten. So the point is, I wish I had known about dung beetles when I was standing out there in the pasture with my dad and his friends. But I didn't know about it. I didn't understand it. I wasn't aware of it. This is a demo that we do for our workshops that we in our pasture ecology school. This is a bucket with a cow pie with no dung beetles in it. And this is a bucket that had a cow pie that had 6 pairs of Poore, which is the most common one in our area. That comes out during the summertime. And this is after 5 days. This you can pick up and chuck like a frisbee. Okay? It's a cow pie. It's a dried out cow pie. We all know what they look like. This is just a shell. There is nothing there. It's like tissue paper. And if you go down into this bucket, we did this at one of the workshops last year, and dump this out, you'll go down and about a foot below, you'll find these balls of manure about that big, with a larva inside. And that's the way those dung beetles reproduce. Incredibly important if you think about the macropores in the soil and collecting rainfall and infiltrating our nutrients down deeper into the soil. Really, these guys are incredibly important. And you can see, this is like one of those ant farms that you had when you were a kid, and each of these little dark things is a channel, and there's one with a root ball down there about a foot below the surface of that cow pond that's up there at the top. So again, lots of really, really interesting things. Now, and I'm going to come back to this and talk about kids again in the end, but you show little kids these dung beetles out in the pasture, and pretty soon they're crawling around and they are dead. They're interested in this stuff, and we have kind of a lot of adults have kind of outgrown waxes, bugs, who cares? So this is a very common sight on our farm, a midsummer cow pie, one day after being deposited, flip it over, and there's probably 200, 300 dung beetles, mostly on the Poore in this week. How in the world did I grow up not knowing that this was right out there at my feet? We've got to be looking around. We've got to be thinking more about it. Ray, the earthworms are important too. But the cropping folks, they don't have the dung beetles. So the earthworms are obviously incredibly important in cropping systems, but the dung beetles may be just as important in pasture systems. Again, we don't totally understand how they work together and collaborate, but we need to work on that. Now, I'm a nutritionist, and I'm not going to talk about cattle nutrition at all today, except for the next 3 slides. And I'm going to tell you that the one thing I've learned, and this is over in that road in Piedmont, North Carolina, minerals are important. So as you approach a livestock management system, you need to be doing it with forages, and you need some supplemental feed. Minerals is going to be the one that is going to be almost indispensable for most folks, especially in our area. It's a little bit debatable. It's something that we are challenged on frequently. Well, having a good mineral feeder is important, and this is the one I like the best. And I've got the plans for this. I'm going to put them on the table in the back. You can pick them up later, and it's also on the web. But again, just a little practical thing, the kind of thing that low tech that our farmers really appreciate and enjoy, those kinds of things. And again, the key, I think, to a lot of our educational activities, this is one of the best county meetings I ever did. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a group like this in an evening county council's meeting and had half of them fall asleep, and everybody goes home and doesn't do anything. I mean, we all kind of know that that's a typical model. But you get them and you put them in like this and let them take those home, pretty soon these are showing up all over the place because people pick up this kind of stuff, and if it works, they'll do it. They just got to be exposed to it. So again, There's a YouTube video on that, and if you are interested, just search on mineral feeder on YouTube. It's the first one that will come up. And you can see how it goes. Okay. Ray left me some extra time. I probably can use this. Let me just make sure. Okay. We're good. Good. Okay. We need to be thinking about our forages. And so as you build a forage system, you need to think about it as a system. We need warm season components. We need cool season components. And we also need legumes, grasses, all of those other kinds of things. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But this diagram, you've seen lots of these. All forages are not created equal in their growth habits and the morphology and that sort of thing. So we need to be pairing up warm season and cool season grasses in most systems, depending on where you are in the country. Of course, this varies some, but we've got to take advantage of some that will give us some good, strong growth in the summer, and then stretch these cool seasons so that we can graze them. And in a system with some tall fescue in it, you can stockpile and graze pretty much the year round if you're not overstocked. And so stocking rate, how many cattle you can practically carry on your farm becomes one of the most important decisions that you'll ever make. Now, I'm not going to spend lots of time on this, but our annuals we got cool season grasses that are both annuals and perennials. My philosophy is we probably need most of our land in perennials. Annuals are good, especially in cropping systems and that sort of thing, but we must, we really must get into this with perennials for the long run. There's just no comparison to them, and this is kind of a good year that's a good example of that. In our country over there, we never did have any nice days this winter. We normally do. Through the winter, we'll have 2 or 3 days in the 60s or 70s, and the winter annuals will come and grow, and we'll get a little bit of growth, and normally by about the end of February, they take off. We got more graze than we know what to do with it. Well, this year, even like ryegrass and stuff is about 4 inches, 6 inches. I mean, it's really late. You realize that we've only got about a month left in the winter in this cool season grazing season, and annuals were kind of a bust this year for us, and that's just something you have to deal with. But the perennials are really have done a lot more, gave us a lot more this year. So ultimately, we need to be looking at developing perennial systems that are healthy and work, and that's our goal for most of these. Of course, when we get to the warm season, we do have annuals there as well. And I'm going to end up talking about annuals and cover crops. So I'm not against these, but certainly I think they're a tool in the toolbox to get you to perennial systems. But for us in our environment, Bermuda grass is a staple in a lot of North Carolina because of the soils. But we also have Dallas grass, and then a lot of interest in the warm season natives. And we're seeing that now. I think, again, the cost of fertilizers, that sort of thing. People are starting to say, well, I know this stuff's tough to manage and get established, but we're gonna do it. We're gonna give it a shot and put it in our system. And so we're seeing quite a few people taking that on, and a couple of workshops we've got this summer will focus on that. Now, the legumes are the other component that are so incredibly important to bring nitrogen into our system. And again, clovers are kind of the standby, but we all, if you're aware of a lot of these cover crop situations, we've got a lot of these to work with that are being used, but not a lot in pasture systems. Red and white clover are standards, but we certainly have the annuals, crimson and arrowleaf that do quite well in our area and can be used in your winter mixes. Also, like berry veg, winter peas, lespedizes are certainly the warm season, and the soybeans and cowpeas. All those warm season ones work well for us too. Now, when we get down into our country compared to here, it's a little bit different because in the dead of summer, cool season stuff doesn't do anything. And up here, you still can get a little bit of growth out of some of these cool seasons during summer in these mixes. So the environment really will dramatically affect how you create mixtures, and we're just learning about that. We had a debate about that. That was one of the maybe an hour of the 8-hour ride that we were doing today. The bottom line is you need to really study your soil, study their adaptation for various forages, and put something in your land that works well. And when I tell people, when we go out usually to their farm, they want to know, we're going to tear this place up and replant it, something that's going to work good. And the answer is, it's not going to work good. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, because you need to manage what you've got. If you can't manage what's already there, killing it and putting something more difficult to manage is not the answer. Get your rotational grazing going, get your fences in good shape, and learn how to manage what you got, and then improve on that. But don't start by killing something that you already don't know how to manage. This is a shot at our farm. Again, this is kind of an April a couple of years ago. And this is orchard grass, bluegrass, white clover are the predominant species here. But again, if you get down and dig around in here, you'll find about 8 cool season species and 2 or 3 warm season species that live on this pasture. This is never been seeded except for the clover. White clover we did put out about 10 years ago. It's still there. We've not had to put it back. But this has all been done with a bush hog and cattle. Not a little bit of lime, but certainly no major inputs, no herbicides, no renovation, no killing and starting over. And so we can take some pretty rough stuff and turn it into something without completely disrupting the system. Now, this kind of leads me into a topic of fescue, and we're still in the fescue belt here in Ohio. It's actually moving north, and I've been doing a lot of winter work in West Virginia the last 3 years, and they're just beat up with fescue over there. I mean, it's an aggressive plant, and it's moving north, and so it's a hell of a problem. And it's in this pasture, but I think you can recognize that that's not the only thing in this pasture. And so adding diversity and trying to manage to get that will help with the fescue problem. But my experience has been it won't solve it. I mean, this fescue deal is a really, really bad problem from an animal health and production perspective. So what do you do about the fescue problem? And this is what's kind of been done in our area. The main thing is to shift to fall calving. And that works in our area. The farther north you get, the more difficult it is to do the fall calving thing. But across the fescue belt, this is one strategy that you can use. If you calve in October, you're gonna breed those cows in January. They're going to be cool. They're not going to have the heat problems with the fescue. And so if I realize if you don't know anything, does anybody in here not know about this fescue thing? The toxins in fescue? Okay, I think most everybody's heard about that. But basically, these are alkaloid toxins that are produced by a fungus that lives in that grass, and it causes most of the problems in the summertime when they're hot. They can't dissipate their heat, and so shifting the fall calving will help you. The other thing is to shift fertilization to late summer and away from spring. And so this is to try to get people to quit dumping fertilizer on something that's going to head out, make a lot of mass of low-quality feed, and then have a lot of toxins in it. If you'll fertilize in the fall, you'll get some fescue growth in, and you'll have clovers and more diversity come in the springtime if you don't feed that with any nitrogen or any other type of chemical fertilizer. Some people are using supplemental feed to get over the problem. That's gotten to be almost restrictively expensive. Improving systems by adding warm season grasses or non-toxic fescue, that's really the most viable long-term strategy, coupled with selecting cattle that can deal with fescue. That's a longer-term challenge, and we're making some genetic progress on that. But building a system that does not completely depend on toxic fescue is probably the most practical thing most of our producers can do. Now, there's land that you can't possibly convert, but there's a lot of land that could be done something with. So we're doing this just to show you, throw in a slide to show you, we are doing some research on this, looking at different strategies for conversion of fescue, looking at ways of managing fescue for, in this case, for winter grazing, and how some of our grazing management may impact the performance of cattle in these systems and that sort of thing. So we're working on it, but this fescue thing is a really difficult thing to work with. And the non-toxic fescue, and if you've not heard of that, Max Q and some of the other varieties are out there on the market. And the reason is because fescue without that fungus in there has been very unsuccessful in our environment. It just doesn't do well. You might as well have orchard grass or some of the other shorter-lived perennials if you're not going to have that fungus in there. So we've developed these non-toxic infected fescues. Max Q, Bar Optim are the two that have been out for several years. This year, there are actually some others on the market, Max Q2, Estancia, and several others that we don't know as much about, but that look like they have good potential. But the questions that we ask in some of our long-term research is, will the cattle really perform better? And will they be as persistent as the toxic fescue? And those are really the questions, and we have to be comfortable about that before we can go out and promote it to farmers. So we've done a lot of small plot type work, but we took it to a larger level. These are larger pastures, and we left cattle out there during the winter time, and basically we did not baby these pastures. Up to this point, most of the work with the non-toxic fescue had been kind of baby plots. They were careful, they didn't want to kill them, they didn't graze them when they were too wet, that sort of thing. Well, this experiment, the goal was to just manage this like we would. We're not going to pull cattle up, it's too wet, all those sorts of things. And put Max Q through the test. And this is a especially memorable day. You see all this ice, and this was a really cold. This was a cold winter grazing research is not for the faint of heart, but certainly when you get people grazing through the winter, it's a great thing. But this is some other pictures from that same study that we did for 5 years to look at the persistence of Max Q. And we graze during the summer as well. So this is, if you've not really seen this graphically, this is an animal that's suffering from fescue toxicosis. You see grazing, seeded out toxic fescue. This is in the next pasture over. Very slick hair coat, very comfortable. You see it's the same headed fescue. And a pretty dramatic difference between the performance of these animals, with very, very similar performance of the grass and very good long-term persistence. So we're pretty excited about it. Now, just to show you what happened on this has been published for several years, but during the winter, we get about a pound a day average daily gain on heifers out of fescue, whether it's E+, which is the toxic, E-, which is indified free, or the green, which is the Max Q. You see, during the winter, we get about a pound a day out of those cattle. They click right along. They don't gain very well, but you can get them through the winter on that. And no difference, because this toxin does not nearly impact them during the winter like it does during the heat. But you turn it back out on pastures in spring, and this is from mid-April to the end of June. These cattle on the toxic fescue gain only half a pound a day. And I think you can see from that picture, they look like they're lucky they did that, and they look like they were going to die at times. The non-toxic were up here around 1.6 pounds per day. So very, very big difference in animal performance. And so this kind of information we can take, we can use some toxic fescue during the winter time, perhaps in our system. But if we had some place to put, like this case, replacement heifers during the spring, we could sure have a lot stronger system. So that's kind of the way we're thinking in terms of our overall fescue programs. Now, just a little bit of trivia here maybe for you if you are interested in this kind of thing. But this is the toxin levels in the 4th and 5th year of that study, with the organocalcoids here being over 2,000 parts per million at the beginning of the grazing in early December. But by the 1st of February, this toxin levels were way down in that grass. And so, so capitalizing on this by using it in the winter, not depending on it during the warm season is where the toxic fescue fits in the system, and we certainly think that it does belong there. Now, that other question of whether the toxic fescue and the non-toxic fescue will have the same agronomic performance, I think that over the long run, we know that the non-toxic is not quite as strong as the toxic, but in this case, if you look at the composition of those pastures over the 5 years, the purple is indified free, and the percentage here is the stuff in there that's not fescue. And so you can see it's increasing as we go along. And the two that have the fungus are pretty well stable and stayed in there 2 to 3% non-fescue in those pastures. So it's pretty strong. Now, one thing that you might say, and again, thinking about the way Ray thinks about things, maybe what we want is this, diversity. Maybe this will lead to more diversity in pastures. And so we're actually seeing a little bit more diversity in these novel pastures as opposed to toxic pastures out on farms around the state. So I think that there's more to this and something that we need to can go out and work on a little bit. E-N. Okay. Well, so E plus is what we usually call the toxic. And it should be in red. I meant to have it in red on this slide. That's toxic. The EN is the non-toxic infectant. So that's the one with that non-toxic fungus in it. And so you see those kind of mimic each other. This is, even though we didn't baby these plots, we did rotationally graze them, and we did not overgraze them during the summer. So if we'd done that with this endophyte tree, it definitely would have looked quite a bit steeper than that in terms of it going away over the time of the study.
Hey Matt, I have a question.
Yes.
How tenacious is that survival of the non-endophyte fescue? Is it resilient? Can it withstand the encroachment of the other fescue coming in, the one we don't want?
Yep. So in that same study, I'll just mention in that same study, we also went in and we looked at these stands after 5 years to see what was there, to see if it was what we started with. And in fact, we had side by side toxic and non-toxic, and we didn't control the seeds, so they both produced seeds. And we did not have them encroaching into the non-toxic pasture. We did not have toxic pests encroach into the non-toxic pasture at all. And I think that's because this is a stronger plant. It's more competitive to those seedlings trying to come up. And so we did have infiltration into this pasture, so that as we looked at the fescue there was an increase in the number of infected plants in the endophyte-free pastures, and it was the max Q. It was the non-toxic that was actually moving into those pastures. It's hard.
That was after 5 years?
After 5 years.
Have you looked at it after 10?
Unfortunately, no. This was a research station. 5 years, we projected what we were going to learn in the next couple of years, and we changed it to a different project.
So Matt, I have a question. How does a person here, do you have to have a special microscope or anything? How do you tell one's infected, endophyte, or?
Okay, you have to send it to a lab. It's microscopic stain. Our state has a lab that does it. I don't know if there's a lab here that'll do it, but there are labs around that'll do it. But old Kentucky 31 fescue, y'all kind of know what it is. Most of it's going to be infected. I mean, if you've got those kind of pastures, chances are most of it's going to be infected. So you can, and probably looking at your animals will tell you more than anything. Yes, please.
So, endophyte-free fescue that gets infected, is that what it is?
Okay. Sort of. But it doesn't, it's not contagious. Okay, so one infected plant can't give an uninfected plant the fungus. But you can take an uninfected plant, and if you find the right fungus, you can somehow inject it in there. And that's proprietary how they do that. But that's how it's done. They take a clean plant and infect it with this special endophyte that is non-toxic. Now, that's not a GMO. It's not something that's been engineered. They've been naturally collected out of systems. And so it's a natural fungus. It's just they get it introduced into these plants that didn't necessarily evolve. Okay, let's talk a little bit about cover crops and stuff. Again, I'm trying to watch time here and try to get through this. As we think about folks, and in our area, we're developing a lot of local beef supply. I mean, we're going to hear more about that later, but we've got a real movement going on in the local meats in our area. And to make that work, it doesn't work very well on toxic fescue. I mean, it's the bottom line. You can hardly do it to make it work. We've got to be thinking about using some annuals. This is the kind of ryegrass we can grow. This is December 8th, mid-September planted ryegrass, December 8th. A lot of potential grazing there, and a lot of ways to incorporate. Again, if you think about a system, you don't want to do this with everything, but if you had some of this kind of grass for your finishers and stuff, it makes a huge difference. And again, trying to get people to think about that. One of our biggest challenges is, many of our biggest challenges are shown in this picture right here. And so, I know one thing, Dave Brandt wants to have some cows. Think about getting some cows, okay? Look carefully, okay? It's hard to avoid this in all situations. And because we have to have a sacrifice place to put them, when it's wet, like you got that 3 inches of rain, where are you going to stand cows around here? This is deep soil, boy. So you have to think through these things and manage them appropriately. And most of this comes from being overstocked, not having grass to keep the cows on. So the key is, the advice for you is don't get too many. Don't get too many. The way they incorporated into this kind of a system with cropping is to not have so many that you got to stand them in a spot and make this kind of mesh. You don't want it. Lots of problems with hay are shown in this picture. The fact that it's so wasteful. This is a farmer that lives at a distant farm, and again, a place that Ray's come and done lots of workshops for us and everything. They're great farmers, but the reality is, if they show up and they need to feed cows, and there's like a fourth of a bale left in each of these rings, they can't just like go home and come back 5 hours later to feed. They got to look at the feed. And so lots of built-in inefficiencies, as well as a real heavy piece of equipment on land that does not need that piece of heavy equipment on it. So all of this is something that we've got to work on as an industry. And even those of us that farm on the side, I hope we don't see a winter like this one for a while, but certainly it's coming. Now let's talk about, hay. Most people have in their mind hay is cheap, and this is not, again, we all have heard this kind of thing before, maybe as many times as you've seen Ray's slate test here. But I must say it again, our hay budgets show about $122 a ton for the total cost of making hay. I know farmers that have got that under $100 a ton, but not much. I mean, it's expensive. It's really hard to do that. Now, couple that with the storage waste that often occurs, because again, most of our hay is stored outside in round bales. 20% is reasonable. So what you have left to feed cows is $152 a ton. And then once you take it out to them, they're going to waste some, no matter how well you do. And it's not unusual to have a 10 to 15% waste. So then the amount that they swallow has ballooned way up into something that's extremely expensive. And so hay just gets more and more costly the more you think about it. And it's something that we need to all of us be thinking about, not making as much hay and making better hay. Please. No, great.
So, like, if you have a big long grazes 320 out there, she would say that hay actually adds nutrients to their fields, and that they much rather buy hay from someone else that adds those nutrients to their field rather than.
Absolutely. Everybody hear that? Okay. Okay, what are the benefits of hay? Okay, there are benefits of hay. And the benefits of hay, let's go to the next slide. This actually works really well. See this picture? This is the most common hay management in North Carolina. And this is honestly the truth. This farmer, I asked him what they're doing with that hay, and I said, I'm looking for a little bit. He said, I won't even give you that hay. That's just terrible rock, it's terrible. I said, well, what about this hay over here? It's not worth feeding. And I'm thinking, why in the world did you make it? Even the people who make it don't put any value. So, again, there's people out there that are going to make hay. And so, people with livestock that understand nutrient cycling and all of that can buy their nutrients through the hay. And then if you do a good job of getting it distributed on pasture, you can make that thing work. But if you buy it and you put it all like that, then it doesn't do you. Then the nutrients don't do you any good. So you need to be thinking about how do we capture the nutrients out of that hay. This is recreational hay making, and it happens. And so when somebody comes up and says, "Can I buy your hay out of the field?" they're like, "Oh yeah, never did that, never thought of that." And so we're seeing a change. We're seeing people that say, "Well, I like making hay. I want to make hay. I can do it for $100 a ton break even. Will you buy it for that?" Yeah. And so that's kind of where we're headed with a lot of our more advanced grazers. Now this is a nutrient map of a farm that spent many, many years, probably 50 years, feeding hay in the same areas. The little white spot here in the middle is where the pens and the office and the hay storage is. And I want you to focus on this little rectangular field right here, field number 4. There's a gate right at the corner of that field. And over the years, what they did was they go through that gate and feed hay just as close to that gate as they could. And then, as it got nasty, they'd go a little farther out, a little farther out. By the end of the winter, they're out in this area. Next winter, same thing again. And so this is phosphorus index. And in our state, this is Melic-3 phosphorus, I believe is what the procedure is. But if it's orange, it needs phosphorus. If it's yellow, it doesn't need it. And if it's green or blue, you're up here where it's a problem. I mean, it's too much phosphorus there and it can cause some problems. This is a very sandy site. So the problem is we can't see it like this. It's out there, but it's hidden. And it's built up in this area to the index in the corner of this field is around 500. Crop response stops way down here at about 80. This one is the one that really bothers me, because that little white line there is a creek. And this is sandy, this is a sandbar right here that's just above that little creek. And so, you know, having a phosphorus hotspot at the head of the creek in sandy soil, that's not good. We just know that's not good. So we've got to think about this. Now, we've used this a lot, and we're trying to get some funding to do this on more farms. Because whenever you show a farmer this, you just see a light bulb go on. They know where these blue and green spots are on their farm. And they also know where the orange stuff is. And hopefully they recognize this whole thing could be yellow if I was thinking about this nutrient thing as I do my feed. So we've got lots, we have people obviously doing this. So this is a farm that I'm going to mention more in a minute. But basically this is a unrolling hay. And this farmer unrolls systematically across these pastures after he's grazed out all of his grass. Only feeds for maybe 30 days in a normal winter. But certainly uses that manure to try to grow grass because of the fertility benefits they have. Another system, obviously, that works on that is stockpiling grass and grazing through the winter. And this should be the main system, and then the hay, in my mind, should be brought in to bring nutrients in for emergency feeding and that sort of thing. And with a daily loop, this is very, very effective. One thing that I have, I don't have kids, but I've got a bunch of nieces and nephews, and I've always had a nephew that needed a job for one reason or another. It's kind of an interesting family dynamic, but I've had one for the last 15 years, it seems like. But the one that's working for me now, he was a city kid, didn't have much perspective on things. We were strict grazing, and we were back in this back pasture, and had a pretty good fescue stockpiled on it. And I was going away for a 2-week trip in the winter, which is a bad thing for me to do, but I told him, so I didn't quite know how to lead him, but I said, Poore, you got this field of fescue here. It's going to get you through a month. And when I come back off this trip, I want to see the manure scattered out there just as evenly as you can possibly get it. I mean, I want it to look like it's been placed out there. So he looked at me kind of like I was crazy. And he knows I kind of am, so that's all right. So he said, well, I'll see what I can do. So when I got back, he was all excited. He said, you got to come back. Bring the camera. Okay. So this is what I found. This is the pasture that he grazed across. And you can see all these little black specks. He's pretty proud of that. Now a kid from a cattle farming family in North Carolina that grew up in this would be embarrassed to look at this and get excited about it. Because they have when you tell them, that's fertilizer, not water. You start thinking about the system. But we don't have, we just don't have folks growing up thinking about this stuff. And when you get somebody that's a clean slate, they can do some stuff that's just amazing that the folks that live with it all the time don't even think of. Do you drag it? I don't know, Doug. I don't know if you drag it. This is an old picture, and the only reason we drug is because that's my mom, and she loved that job. More power to you. Come on, let's drag it. But she kind of retired out of that. We don't drag much more. We do some bad feeding areas and stuff and put in some crabgrass to heal the land. But some folks like to drag. This is a pretty practical drag, and I just realized I don't have this on the web, but I'll post this on the website. If you do a little bit of dragging or like to do a little bit of dragging, this is a farmer invention that he probably saw it somewhere else, but basically a couple pieces of cable and some old tires and a drill you can make on in a few hours. I don't know if you can read that, but I love farmers. He came and talked to a group like this, and he put this up, and this is kind of the way he talks and things. This design is patented. Please send all donations to E.B. Harris. If you don't know who he is, he's famous. His fame is growing across many states in the Southeast. The point I want to end that little part of it is this area right there. That's where that little dog was standing in that earlier picture. That's what amazing grazing is. It's getting all these things working together and then letting nature do what she's supposed to do. And it happens. But I'll tell you, I stand out there the other day thinking about how much this has changed. 24 years is what's gone into this. Of labor, of time, and not a lot of money, but a lot of effort has gone into it. It's the way it is. So why don't people do it? You know, and again, I've talked about not growing up with it. This is my dad, and he's always argued every point with me, no matter what. No matter what, after I turned about 16. And so we really debate a lot about this grazing management. He says it's a big waste of time. So I got him to come to grazing school, and he agreed he would do it for like 2 weeks. And then at the end of the 2 weeks of him moving this fence every day, he came and he said, "Oh, we got a problem." I said, "Well," I figured he's going to bail on me. He said, "Your mom and I are supposed to go to the beach this weekend. We can't go. We got to move cows." I said, "No, you don't. I'll do it." He said, No, we want to move cows." I said, "No, yeah, Dad, if you've got a trip to the beach planned, go to the beach. Give them a 3-day piece and go to the beach." He said, "Will that be all right with you?" I said, "Yeah." Great flexibility. So within 2 weeks of doing it, he's convinced this is the way to do it. And so I know it works because he never gave him anything that is. Took me 2 years to get him to buy the first name in school. Okay, so let me get on. I'm going to finish this with a little string of stuff on what we're now doing and how we got there. And I think how am I on time? I'm still not exactly sure. 15 minutes, perfect. Okay, so we started after this drought thing that we went through. We had a lot of interest. We had people saying, "Where's the next workshop going to be? We need to learn. This is great stuff. When are we going to go? What are we going to do?" So from 2009 to 2011, using some of that grant money from the drought and some other grants that we got, we went out to do this winter grazing thing. And our goal was to expose farmers all across the state to winter grazing on farms of their peers. Not research stations, not some, retired person who's had all the money and time in the world, but real farmers. They're all real farmers. Those guys are real farmers too. But I mean the average farmers. We did 31 demonstrations and associated workshops on 25 different farms. We did some a couple of years in a row because it was such a great place. We really wanted to go back. And, Ray always wanted to go back to certain places over and over again. But we ended up stockpiling about nearly 3,000 pounds of grazable grass per acre that these farms wouldn't normally have had. We got about 106 cow grazing days out of each acre of that, so we documented that on those farms. And we saved those guys about $1.10 a day per cow for every day that they were able to graze that stockpile grass. So in the end, it made them, and it's not a lot of money. That's the thing, when you got 25 cows, you're going to save $25 a day. But that makes a big difference at the end, that little bit of money in your pocket that you get out of these systems. It can really help you. Not to mention all of the things I said before about the mental health and all of that. But the most exciting thing was really to get people out on the land, get people to realize that this stuff was for real, and to see the interest grow. And this is Johnny Rogers, who's one of our great guys. He's on the board of our Forage and Grassing Council, and I'm going to mention him here in a minute because he's been a real key person in our whole program. But this is a typical workshop in the first year. We'd have maybe 15, 20 people come. And as we went through, we learned things like they can get through snow. Snow's not that big a deal. This is one of Johnny's pictures from that first year. But we started getting people interested. This is a guy named Mike Jones, and he's an interesting character. Lives up in the foothills of the mountains, and this is a midwinter picture. And Mike grazes year-round, He's got to where he doesn't use any fertilizer, uses a little bit of poultry litter in his system, but not very much, doesn't like using anything. And he's a real, he's, you know, I'm just kind of standing here with my hands in my pockets. I don't say much in these workshops. The farmers really do most of the talking, and people are very interested, and people definitely go home and do something after these workshops. Now, all along through this, I've been kind of challenged by folks telling me, you know, you need to quit talking about this stuff and make sure you're doing it right. And so the most important thing about all this is that you need to develop a management style that's going to work for you, and not wear you out so bad at the end of 2 years you just quit, and that sometimes happens. So this is my project. This is our replacement heifers, and now we've got some beef steers over here at that farm. It's a small farm where I mostly grew up. Not a lot of infrastructure on that farm. We do have hay at that farm. You see there's 3 rolls right there. That sat there for 4 years. We never used it because we're stocking this to get through the winter with stockpile grazing. So we've done this now we're in about the 8th or 9th year of this, of me managing it on the weekend. So I go, I test the fence, I set up the week's grazing, so I've got about 6 reels that I've got dedicated to that farm. And then my nephew goes over there on Tuesday and Thursday and takes down the fence. That's all he has to do. Check the cows, make sure they're all there, make sure they're all living. And then he gives them that strip of grass and goes. And I set it up on the weekend. So, you know, that works for me. I can do that, and I can actually have a group of cows, and I'm fully responsible for the decisions that are being made. And it just does me a lot of good. Nothing better than a Saturday in the winter, no matter how terrible the weather is, going out there and giving these cattle grass. So we're just another kind of shot of that from earlier in the winter. I love doing this because I see things when I'm out moving cattle. I see things I don't normally see. I start looking and seeing these animals that are, you know, a body condition score higher than everybody else in that system. That's telling me something. Genetically adapted very well to the system. Perhaps there's that same cow when she grew up, and she's an easy keeper. I guess I knew she was going to be by the way she did as a heifer. So important that we learn these kinds of things. You learn about snow. You learn about a little bit about ice with polywire. It's not that much fun. You have to deal with it. Not a reason to quit. You have really red hot fences. This can be weighed all the way down to the ground, and cattle will not get out for a day. 2 days they will. You got to go do something about it, but it's not going to be a disaster. And this is this is kind of one method. This happened to be a pitchfork that day, but you can take one of these threading posts and just walk down that wire as fast as you can walk and knock the ice off of it. No problem. A little bit of winter grazing. I said I've been coming up to West Virginia. Everywhere I go, you know, even where I know there's not a lot of this going on, usually have somebody come up and say, "Can you come out to my farm tomorrow morning? Because I'm trying to do some of this." So it's going on. It's happening. You can kind of see that this is a young lady that was there in Mineral County, West Virginia, and she was very systematically fertilizing that pasture by enrolling hay. I think that's a really good demonstration of that. So, okay, kind of down the home stretch here, we need to learn the tools for this process. We need to learn a lot more about electric fence, and I'll invite you. I think we're all going to be kind of out there talking about fence after lunch, and you'll have a chance to get some questions answered, hopefully, about that if you have problems. I usually ask folks, how many of you have electric fence? And a lot of people do. And I ask, how many of you have problems with it? And everybody does. You know, it's something, again, the more you look at it, the more you think about it, the harder it gets to manage it. But lots to learn about that, and certainly good fences and getting out in the field. And again, young people are just fascinated by this stuff. So I just want to keep bringing that up and talking about it. But we have a lot of fun with these workshops and showing the different equipment and how to use it. And really, we're getting a very quick uptake of this. And certainly, the fencing thing seems to be something that's hot right now. Now, I said earlier, you know, this is kind of the very end of that winter grazing stuff. By the time we got to the end of this thing, we were having, you know, 30, 40, 50 people show up at these workshops. And we really weren't trying to have be over about 30 people. And so it became more and more like this. And I think you might recognize that when something like this happens, somebody's talking. And I don't know if you see this gray hair right there. See that guy right there? Ray. And I realized, I learned something. We started working with Ray, and this actually was a time that we were on the road for 4 days together. And Ray is not afraid to say what he thinks is going on. Where I would say, well, I'm not sure, it depends, I wish I had some data. Ray says, well, I don't know, this is what I think. And people listen, and people try to do stuff. And maybe it doesn't work. Ray accused me of being an academic and afraid to try anything I didn't have data to prove worked. Right? I mean, we've had these conversations. Well, I'm not afraid anymore. Okay? We're working with silver pasture systems, need tons of data. We can't wait for it. We're not going to wait until these trees are cut to make a decision on whether I'm going to recommend the system. The kids, again, everything we do, we're trying to integrate these kids into getting them to where this is a very normal thing instead of like, what is that? Because that's what most of them at this point are still saying. Okay, 5 minutes on mob grazing. Doug, are you going to say something about mob grazing?
Not a lot.
Not a lot, okay? The more I study it, the less I know about what it is, okay? Typically, 100,000 pounds per acre stock density is people's just, that's the definition. Above that, I don't buy that. I don't buy that. Mob grazing is something to do with the behavior of the animals. The animals change when you put them in a dense stocking density system. I don't think there's anything magic about 100,000, 200,000, 50,000. But once you put them into a situation where they're close together and it's a competitive eating situation, they change. So mob grazing is managing them as a group rather than managing them as a bunch of individuals. And when we let them roam around a lot of area, they're individuals. They just soon not be close to each other. But these are herd animals. Once you get them used to being together in a mob, that's where they want to be. And so you can be a little more flexible in how you lay it out and stuff, but they stay a mob for several weeks, even when they're not in a real dense situation. So I think it's more, there's a lot more to it than just those simple relationships. But this is a long story, and I don't have time for that, but we do our national NRCS school, and one of our classes challenged me at the end of that school. Ray does, that's how I got to know Ray. And this was a demo that when 4 students had this group of cows, they wanted a mob grazing demo. They got it down where they had it exactly right by the end of the 2 weeks. And one gal in there said, Dr. Poore, what's going to happen to our little demo here when we go home? And I said, well, they're going to take down the fences, and these cows are going to have the rest of the pasture for the next week, and then they'll do what they normally do. And she said, well, I was afraid of that. We've talked about this. We want you to manage this. I said, I can't do that. I'm too busy and whatever. She said, well, how far away from here do you live? It's about 10 minutes. She said, well, don't you tell people that if they live 10 minutes from their cows, that they ought to swing by and, spend some time moving them every day? Yeah, I think I said that yesterday. So they said, well, so what's the problem? So I said, okay. She said, well, by the end of summer, we want a report. So I did it. So what happened was, I started to realize I didn't know very much about this. I didn't know how to do it very well. I'd lost a lot of my practices. So I started putting up polywire. I started getting into this thing and getting a lot better at it and noticing things all along the way. And once I noticed these cows, once we first did this, they were butting each other. They were not comfortable close together. So there was a lot of fighting, a lot of sort of fussing around. And in about 10 days, they changed. They started to be where they would go in and they would have their heads this close together. It's like some of these cows right here. That's not normal. That was not normal for this bunch. They want their space. But once they were a mob, man, they started eating like crazy. They started eating stuff that maybe we don't want to eat. I don't know. Pesky seed heads, bam, they just eat them all the way on. And it's okay. But this is that effect. Stomping half the grass probably and having the rest there. But you notice the weeds, they're disappearing. And this is not a fake picture. This is horse nettle, which is one of our real tough weeds that we have to live with in these systems. This is before grazing, this is after grazing. They ate all of it. I took samples of that, it was 16% protein, and the TDN was like 70. It was like way better than the grass. Now, if that's all they had to eat, they'd be terrible. But a little taste of that along with everything else helps to balance the diet. They won't eat everything. They don't like milkweed. They stomp it pretty good. And again, get it back into the system. This is what we're going to talk a little bit after lunch out there at the fencing. Kind of how to do some temporary fencing. This is a situation where I think you notice this is weed. This is weeds. I know weeds when I see them. This is lamb quarters and pig weeds. And it was an old feeding area. We decided we just had to use this. We were not satisfied to just bush hog it and let it go to waste. So we set up 6-acre pasture. We set up and the cows just love this stuff. And again, trained cows, mob cows, they know, girls, this is what's for dinner. Let's eat it. And they eat it. Okay? That's true. Look, this is like the next day. See that cow, how full she is? And this is the typical behavior. They're ready to eat this, but they're not going anywhere. They're not bawling. They're not upset. They see me come, they're like, okay, here he comes. Time to eat. But they're not upset. They're well fed. And this is what we got out of that 6-acre pasture. I just wanted to show you, this is a crude map. But me and one student, we did all this, and I spent no more than 15 minutes a day, maybe not even that, getting all this done and laying it out. But how you do all this, it's not simple. It's something you've got to learn. You've got to go to some of these workshops and practice this stuff. But we got farmers doing it. This is a farm that's doing that same thing. I'm gonna skip through this very fast because I think I'm pretty much out of time. Okay, but it's a matter of setting up some temporary fencing. Letting the cows in, and there you have the first day of grazing. Drop that one, you got the second day. They still got to walk over the first day to get the water. That's okay. They're not going to do any damage in that one day. And it takes about 4 reels to do this kind of thing. But again, not much time, and that's the way, that's kind of the way you can get into doing this if you have the tools and you can do it in just a few minutes. So again, mob grazing, I think it's that change of behavior in the cows more than anything, so that they work as a group as opposed to the stock. But I'll tell you that water and shade in these systems are not to be taken for granted. We've got to do some system development, and I encourage you to think about yours and how to improve it. But I'm going to flip through some slides real quickly to end this thing. We're interested in these annuals primarily to convert fescue systems. You guys can read. This is an undergraduate student. She named it Raised Crazy Mix. Then she said, well, should we call it Crazy Raised? That's getting a little personal there. Okay, Raised Crazy Mix. This is a 9-way mix. Y'all are familiar with them. Cowpeas, soybeans, sorghum Sudan, millet, some brassicas in there, that sort of thing. This is on a farmer's farm that first year that we did it. Tremendous interest. Partly because it's Raised Crazy Mix. They're always like, what in the world is that? Some activity at our place that first year. This is my home and my nephew. Well, we learned this stuff's not that easy to graze. Fencing something like that that's that big is tough. But cows that are, again, trained the system can do it. My nephew, again, cowpeas here. And sorghum Sudan in this particular simple mix.
Hey, could you tell the audience, Matt planted that into an existing fescue pasture, right? Did you mention
Correct,
that?
yeah, fescue conversion. That's a fescue conversion
So we had a
project.
no-till planter drill right into it.
Okay, so we thought we learned a lot in 2012. You remember the year we had last year? We put this mix in the ground, and the next 2 weeks we had like 8 inches of rain. And then the next week after that, we had another 4 inches of rain. And before we could even think, the sorghum Sudan said, this is it. And it pretty much killed everything else in that mix. If you went out there, it was mostly sorghum Sudan. A few cowpeas here and there. But it got completely out of control. So That's a 7400 John Deere, so that's not a little tiny tractor, that's a 100-horse tractor. And he's not running the bush hog, he's just making a place to put a fence up. But look at the cover. Look, this is Bob Gray's. Look at the soil cover on that. And they crush it all down, but we get a tremendous amount of grazing days out of that. Ray came and we did an estimate of biomass out there, 5 tons per acre. That field, I bet, has never produced 5 tons per acre for the whole year. Ever maybe. So there's some stuff there. One of our farmers, again, Johnny Rogers. If you've never met this guy or don't know this guy, you probably will, because he's the real thing. He deals on all rented land and has been a big part of our amazing grazing program as it's developed and started. He had the sorghum got away from him too. Now he's a full-time farmer. He had a little better shot at it than I did. But he still sorghum solid, the sorghum Sudan got away from him, and he had to really spend a lot of time grazing it. But a lot of benefit there to that stuff. So finally, this year, the snowball is getting huge. I sent out a message of who wants to be involved in this, and we're going to have 28 different farms involved in this summer. We really want to see some of these alternative forages, and we've got a lot of interest in that, and a lot of other activities that we have planned. Now I'm done, but I'll keep this around. I'll be around for the next 2 days. This is kind of our mix has evolved, and we had a conversation last night. How in the world? I think it was you, Don. How do you figure out what to put in these mixtures? That's been my biggest problem. You know what I learned from Ray? You guess. Right, Ray?
It's an art!
But I'll tell you, that's right. Every one I've come up with and sent to Ray, if it's got 6 species in it, he says, nah, won't work. Put 2 more species in it, oh, that's great.
I got 3 functional groups.
Okay. But this year, this is what we're planning this year. We've added grazing corn to our mix, cowpeas and soybeans. Dave, this is the one we started kind of talking about this when you came to visit us. So we're going to see how it goes. Folks, it's been great. And I'm going to be around again the rest of the day today, all day tomorrow. We're going to have Doug out there in the back talking about fencing and stuff after